A team member here at the museum. It's my pleasure to be your MC over this afternoon. Kind of a bit of a whip-cracker, timekeeper and introducer. Quick show of hands, those people who have never been here before. Well, fantastic. Thank you very much for coming. Special welcome to you, and we hope it's the first visit of many. And a big welcome to some of our regular visitors. If you haven't been here for some time, there's a few new machines that you want to check out. Lovely little Golding in the foyer out there, the Imperial over behind us, and a lovely little bench press which is in the back there. So check with one of the members and they will show you that. Our museum is constantly growing and evolving. I would at this point like to acknowledge and pay respect to the Darug and Gundungurra people, the traditional owners of the land on which the museum sits. And we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Folks, this event for Rare Book Week is held in conjunction with the State Library of New South Wales. It's the third year that we have run the event. First year we focused on Shakespeare. Second year was on boxwood engraving. And this year we have some fascinating presentations coming up. Now first we're going to get Jean Cropper going to dive into the curious evolution of book structures. And then we are going to have explore the history of types and fonts from Gutenberg to Google with Andy Laporte. And then our President Bob Lockley is going to come up here. We're going to explore the massive impact that the linotype and intertype machines had on the whole printing industry. And if you've never seen one of these operating before, I can guarantee it's going to blow your mind. All right. But wait, there is more. We'll have some refreshments for you over in the corner. Tea, coffee, a few snacks. So whenever you feel like you need some, go and have a chat to the team over there. And we're then going to get a little bit more interactive. We're going to crank up some of the machines. The compositing room will be open, and make sure you grab one of Linda's little Rare Book Week cards from her and have a look at the displays in the foyer. We've got the Gutenberg Bible out for you to have a look at. Please don't touch. If you want to see some different pages, ask one of the team in blue to put on the gloves and they'll show you some more pages. And as I say, we are going to crank up some of the machines. The mighty Wharfdale, you can see over there in the corner, the two Heidelbergs that you've been heard running already, the linotypes and the Ludlow machine. Thumbs up, John, they're all under control. We're all working. He's nodding confidently over there, which is good. And we might even get you guys pulling some levers on some of the more historic machines that you see here. The common press from the early 1700s, that's a replica. There's only two replicas in the whole place. That and the Bible. We can't afford the $50 million to buy a new one. The incredible Columbian press, which has got a marvellous story from the 1840s, the Imperial from the 1850s, and this lovely pearl right here. So feel free to take pictures, to take videos as we go through the afternoon. And if you want to tag us on Instagram, it's hashtag, it's at Penrith Print Museum. But I must point out, before you guys get a bit more interactive, hands-on, the printing business is a complicated thing. Okay? There are many strange words, there are many traditions that you have to learn, and you have to also learn to deal with both the printers in here and the compositors out there. I must warn you that the printers in here are a funny bunch. They of course regard their domain as the most important place in the museum. And most of them are also ambidextrous. Did you know that? It helps when you run a machine like this guy over here. Because to run that, you have to stand on one leg, you have to pedal with the other, you have to take things out with one hand and put things in the other, all in that minute time before the button closes. So before I can put any of you on there, I need to do a test. This is the printer's test. Now, everyone hold your hands out just in front of you like that for a moment. That's good. Good, good, good. Wiggle thumbs. Now, turn your hands so your thumbs are at the bottom. That's good. That's it. Very good. And cross your hands like this and put your fingers together. Lock them nice and tight. Come on, everybody do it. Oh, no, that's it. Great. Now, keep wiggling the thumbs like that. And on the count of three, we will turn our wrists sideways. 1, 2, 3, go. Like that comes on the top, keep wiggling. It's not going to work. Robert, you'll be on doing the pattern press, all right? So maybe you guys will be better over in the compositing room, the comp room we call it. These guys, of course, are a funny bunch who work in there. They, of course, believe that their part of the museum is the most important part of the museum. And they have learned to read thank you. Yes. They have learned to read upside down and back to front. It's part of their journey. And they're also very good at spelling, they're very good at punctuation, they're very good at comprehension. So just a quick compositors test. I've got 3 words written on the back of this piece of cardboard. When I point to the word, I want you to say the name of the word out loud. Here we go.
Book, play, film.
Fantastic. I've got 3 more words, but this time don't tell me the word, tell me the colour it's printed in.
Green, blue, red.
That's pretty good, actually. Come and try this again.
Red, brown, blue.
You guys would make good printers, I think. Enthusiastic, but not very bright. All right. No, this is great. A couple of bits of housekeeping before we crack on. Appropriate at this time to turn your phones on to silent. Toilets, we do have a toilet block. It's just around the corner there. It's fairly basic. It's just how you imagine a toilet block would be at a Paceway in Penrith. So we're advising people to, maybe you'd like to pop over to the club, which is about 2 minutes walk over that way. You probably need to sign in with a driver's license as you would at any club, but that's probably your safest bet. In the case of a fire emergency, we have 3 exits. We have through the conf room, we have through the foyer area, and out through the kitchen as well. And we kind of follow the people in blue. They'll be the ones running ahead outside. So that should be fine. And lastly, I'm sure you've figured this out already, but printing presses are relatively dangerous machines. They have moving parts. They have lots of sticky out bits and bumpy bits. And they're built of iron and steel, so they're very uncompromising. And I'm sure if you ask any of the printers in here, they can show you a cut or a bruise that they've made straight away. And they're also oily, and they're also greasy, and they're also inky. So my suggestion to you is stay well back behind the barriers while the machines are running. So quite a lot of new people, which is great. Very, very quick history of the museum. We opened in 2001, effectively based around the Wharfdale that you see over there, and one of the linotypes in the back. And that beast used to run the Nepean Times for many years. And when that closed down in 1962, that was destined for scrap. And it just had to be saved, and here we are 24 years later. The museum is run entirely by volunteers, most of whom have a background in printing or are keen enthusiasts such as myself. And we rely on the support of a small band of sponsors and, of course, donations of money and equipment from the public. So our current list of sponsors, let's whiz through this. Penrith Paceway, the Ivy Group, Finsbury Green, Watcher Systems, Bright Print Group, Lamson Group, Imagination Graphics, and Graph Pack. I think they deserve a round of applause. We couldn't do this without them. And as well as being open to the public on Sundays, we run tours on demand for many visiting groups, book clubs and probers groups and car groups, and they love it here because there's plenty of parking, lots of old machinery, lots of noise, and of course they can have a beer at the club. We also run workshops on demand, small group workshops, sometimes just 2 or 3 people who want to learn poster making, typography and printing with the smaller Dana presses. And we also do off-site visits. We'll take a couple of the smaller presses and go out and we share the love around of printing. So recently at the Wallandilly Heritage Centre and Arms of Australia Museum and the State Archives are coming up soon. But lastly, there's something that we are very proud of here. This is a living museum. It's not a static display. It operates, it runs, it smells of ink, of oil, hot metal. 90% of the presses you see here work. And the 10% that don't are actively being restored or refurbished and repaired back into a working condition with our engineering team. In fact, the whole place is packed with treasures. Our reference library is unique in Australia. It's filled with books and manuals. And our comp room has hundreds of image blocks out there, nearly 5,000 wood type blocks, and I know that because I counted them myself. And nearly probably hundreds of thousands of pieces of metal type, from 72 point down to this minuscule 4-point type. And every machine here has a history and a story, and we know most of them. But it's relatively easy to save these machines. It's a lot harder to save the knowledge. The real treasure here in the museum are the people involved. Our volunteers who turn up week after week to share their knowledge and their enthusiasm for the art and craft of printing. And it's the people who walk through that door on a Sunday. Some with a pile of books, a small disintegrating box of rusty old type, and a story to tell about Grandad who used to work in the industry. Or sometimes it's Grandad himself, and he's bringing the kids along, or the grandkids along, to show them what it was like in the time before apps and screens and passwords. And it's the people who ring up President Bob far too late of an evening and say, "We've got this old printing press, would you like it?" Of course we'd like it, but what is it? What parts are missing? And how are we going to get it here? And importantly, where are we going to put it? And it's people like you, showing your support of the museum and these events, and for that we thank you for being here. We better get on with it.
Woo!
Woo!
That was great. Sorry.
Our first presentation, the curious evolution of book structures. Books haven't always looked the way they have. They have developed year by year into different shapes and different formats. We have with us Jean Cropper, an internationally published author of 3 books, including Handmade Books and Cards with Davis Publications. She's been a hand paper maker, a graphic designer, book artist, printmaker, and paper engineer. And she designs high-response marketing promotions that pop up, and fold, and move, and teach people. And she teaches people workshops in the book arts through her own studio, Paper and Pixel. She's a member here at the Penrith Museum of Printing, and loves having conversations with others interested in the curious world of books and paper. So, would you please put your hands together and welcome Jean Cropper.
Writing. And at Sydney University Library I got to hold some clay tablets, and it was just rather wonderful to handle something that had been written 2,000 years ago. Wax tablets, the original tablets. They were made from rectangular wooden planks with a raised border to retain the wax. The writing surface was painted with white plaster, then coated with a mix of wax and black soot. Students, secretaries, tradespeople, and bookkeepers incised marks into the wax tablets with a stylus, with the marks revealing the white surface below. They erased their marks by smoothing the wax with a straight-edged spatula, which was often on the other end of the stylus. Often 2 tablets were tied together with a leather thong. These writing surfaces were used for ordinary people. New ideas, new information could be put down and changed. Being able to erase left room for creativity, for changes, for responsiveness. Being reusable and very portable, inexpensive and accessible, wax tablets were a huge leap forward. The oldest examples is from the 14th century BC in Turkey, and another from Greece in the 8th century BC. They were used extensively alongside papyrus scrolls throughout the Roman Empire. Their use dropped with its fall. However, its advantages kept it around as a book form into the 1400s in Europe, and it was used occasionally for bookkeeping in Germany and France until the 1800s, which is pretty amazing. The modern expression, a clean slate, comes from this time. Papyrus sheets and scrolls. In Egypt around 3000 BCE, papyrus plants were picked from the muddy banks of the Nile. Their stems were sliced, and the pith was laid in strips, alternating horizontal and vertical layers, and then they were pressed to create a textured writing surface. The material was lightweight, plentiful, and portable, and it became a very valuable export. Only one side of papyrus could be used. It cracked when folded, it could tear, and nothing could be erased. Brushes were needed to write on this rough, textured surface. Straight lines were harder to make with a brush than a chisel, so more curves and pictograms were used in the writing. The inks used carbon black or iron gall. Papyrus was made into sheets and then in long scrolls. Most scrolls were 5 or 10 meters long, but some were up to 40 meters long. However, long scrolls were unwieldy, since there were no chapters or pages yet. So it was very difficult to locate one point in a text quickly. The scroll format spread to East Asia. It became standard there for literature or philosophical texts, known as sutras, as well as administrative texts by governments. Though mostly superseded by paper, the dry climate and availability of papyrus kept its use alive in Egypt until the 9th century BCE. Palm leaf books. Now we travel to Southeast Asia to continue our story. Here palm leaves were boiled in milk and then cut into long horizontal strips with a hole pierced in each end. The book structure was formed by stringing these strips together, a bit like Venetian blinds, and I've got an example that I'll show you in a minute. This book form was used from the 5th to the 1st century BCE. While lightweight, portable, and durable, they could be destroyed by humidity, insects, and mold. This required regular recopying of texts and careful preservation. I found this lovely one in an antique shop some years ago. So you can see the little pages. So sometimes they were a bit bigger than this, but they couldn't be too large because of the size of the leaves limited what they could make. In North India, palm leaves were written on with ink. And in South India and along the eastern coast and up to including Orissa, palm leaves were incised with a stylus. The letters were then blackened and made visible by rubbing a cloth steeped in a mixture of lamp-black and oil across the surface. Each of these book forms arose in different places, in different times, from local materials, using local skills and their needs for communication. In 3rd century BC in India, Sri Lanka, and Cambodia, and parts of Myanmar, palm leaf manuscripts were used extensively for religious texts. They continued to be used in India and Sri Lanka into medieval times. They were also used for medicine, science, mathematics, poetry, philosophy, and astrology. The rounded shapes of many Southeast Asian scripts, like Sinhala and Sanskrit, were developed for writing on palm leaves, and since straight lines could tear the delicate surface of the leaves, they had rounded letters. And I find it fascinating that alphabets were changed in response to the material. Coptic books in the codex book form. Next, we travel to Ethiopia. The Copts, the early Christian monks in Ethiopia, first created the codex structure. That's the book form we use today. That is, folded pages, bound down one side with binding stitches visible. The Copts lived beside people making book rugs, sparking the development of this intricate and elegant Coptic binding. These were the first books that resembled the book form that we use today. This is a Coptic book that I found, so you can see the chain stitches that it's an exposed binding. They're really quite level. This started not particularly successfully in the 1st or 2nd century ID with folded pages of papyrus that were pierced and sewn. Does anyone know why folding papyrus would cause a problem?
Wax will melt.
It would crack when folded, yeah. Papyrus cracked when folded. When parchment and paper were invented, that was quickly adopted for Coptic books. Papyrus was used because that's all there was at the time. As you can see, available materials had a huge effect on book structure. A trade war leads to the invention of parchment. There was an intense rivalry between the libraries in Alexandria, Egypt, and Pergamon, Turkey, as to which library held the largest number of scrolls. I believe Alexandria had 400,000 scrolls at the time. When the Pergamon library appeared to be winning, Egypt cut off the supply of papyrus. It was the 2nd century BC, and another writing surface needed to be invented. Parchment was made from calf, goat, and sheep skins. They were cleaned, scraped smooth, and dried to create it. And a little bit of parchment I'll pass around. Making parchment from animal skins was very labor-intensive, so it was expensive, but it had some new advantages. It was the first two-sided writing material. It also allowed people to make mistakes and correct them, which is important. Its smooth surface allowed illuminators to create the intricate designs and detailed letter forms that we know from medieval book of hours and other manuscripts. Also, it didn't tear easily, so that was much better than papyrus. And the smoothness also sparked the development of quills and later dipped pens. Each new material fostered new tools for writing. The codex, folding pages, becomes possible. Parchment had other important properties too. Unlike papyrus, it could be folded without cracking and folded repeatedly. The parchment sheets were folded into folios, pierced through the crease and bound. The pages could be turned repeatedly without damage. The codex took off as a book form. This changed how we organized information. And codex simply means that it's folded sheets of paper that's bound down one side. So that's sort of the book form that we use today. That's what that's called. Let's see. Why books needed hard covers? Parchment had one disadvantage. It worked with changes in humidity. That is, it was hydrophilic. So these books needed rigid wooden covers and metal clasps to hold the pages flat. Otherwise, the books would warp and distort from changes in humidity. This was the start of hardcover books. Because of the expensive parchment, most books were commissioned by kings, queens, or noble families, some taking a few years to be written and illustrated by hand. This led to the chained libraries, where these valuable books were chained to shelves to prevent thefts. Though not many of these books were religious texts, others were literature, law, history, and science. So this is a drawing of a chained library. And the Bodleian Library in Oxford has a chained library, which I just love to go visit. The invention of paper. We moved to China to continue our story, again looking at the materials used for writing. The invention of paper is credited to Cai Lun in China around 105 AD, though paper samples have been found that are actually 200 years older. Mulberry bark, hemp waste, old rags, and discarded fishing nets were boiled and beaten into pulp and put into a vat of water. To form the sheets, a fine bamboo screen was dipped into the paper pulp, lifted up, and the water drained off to leave a coating of pulp to dry on the screen. These paper sheets were considerably cheaper to make than parchment. Later, bamboo and other bast fibers were used for pulp, and bast fibers are inner bark fibers that were used in China and Japan for paper. Paper making became a very valuable industry in China, and the process was kept secret for more than a century. Eventually, paper makers were kidnapped, and paper making spread to Samarkand and west along the Silk Road. It reached the Middle East, then Morocco and Sicily in the 11th century. Around 1260s to 1270s, the knowledge of paper making reached Fabriano in Italy, which is still a working paper mill. Cotton fiber, hemp, and flax rags were used. Old clothing, then all made from natural fibers, was always collected and used for paper making. So you couldn't throw clothes away, they were always collected and reused the fiber for paper making. And very interesting, when the British went into Egypt and they were found mummies, a lot of the bandages, the linen bandages, were stolen and used in paper making. How paper as a material changed the book form. Like parchment, paper could be folded without cracking, and writing could be done on both sides. This meant that pages could be folded and bound. It also meant that information could be divided into chapters and pages and numbered, which allowed immediate access to specific points in a text. This was a great improvement in readability. Paper's low cost allowed more people to share information and ideas, and its smooth surfaces supported early commercial printing from woodblock plates in China and Japan. And this is an example of a woodblock plate. And there was actually quite an industry of commercial printing, hand printing from woodblock plates. I believe it was for examinations for students. So, yeah, quite interesting. Concertina binding for Leporello. We returned to the Far East to revisit book structures. Different bindings developed in different places, in different times, with whatever materials was available. After paper was developed in China, the concertina became a popular book structure. Basically, it was a scroll that was folded into pages and mounted between two hard covers. It's still used by artists today. So these are, you can see the zigzag structure. This is a little sketchbook that I made. Is a concertina. So it's basically a zigzag structure between two hardcovers. Japanese stab binding. The Japanese stab binding was ideal for binding single sheets or folded sheets that were printed or written on one side. It was elegant, durable, and inexpensive book structure with a soft cover. Individuals could easily bind them quickly with few tools, becoming the first paperback books. Stab-bound books were first developed around the 12th century and still used in some ways today. So these are all stab-bound books. Actually, pass those around. Gutenberg and printing. Though the Koreans were printing with movable brass type in 1377, decades before Gutenberg, it could not be commercialized because their language had too many characters and they hadn't developed a suitable oil-based ink. However, German and English had only 26 letters, so movable type became viable. It was Gutenberg who realized the possibilities in the 1440s. He carved and cast individual letters that could be rearranged, reused, and reused again to print any text. After looking at wine presses, he developed the first printing press and printed the now famous 42-line Gutenberg Bible between 1453 and 1455. It was the first book printed in large quantities in Europe. And we've got a facsimile of the Gutenberg Bible here, and the common press is very similar to what Gutenberg's press was, and that's just over there. It was momentous because printed text could widely be distributed for the first time in the West. Widespread literacy could not have happened without paper and printing. Not enough pulp for paper. There was a glitch. Is there always? Printing couldn't take off yet. We moved from Italy to France and England to continue the story. At this time, all paper was handmade sheet by sheet, and it could not be made quickly. In France, after 5 years of work, Louis Nicolas Robert invented a prototype for a paper-making machine in 1798 that formed a continuous belt of wire screening. Next, John Gamble patented an improved version in England in 1801. Then it was the Foudrinier brothers, Henry and Seeley, who refined the idea into the first viable paper-making machine in 1807. So now there was a machine to make paper, there's a printing press, but just not enough pulp. So we're getting there. Printing could not yet take off as a new technology, as an industry, without inexpensive, easily available material to print on. Pulp was made from old clothes and did not supply enough pulp to feed the presses. Pulp was not available in quantity for another 40 years. Matthias Coops in England began the development of breaking down wood for pulp. Then both Charles Finnerty in Nova Scotia, Canada, and Frederick Gottlob Keller in Germany independently developed similar mechanical wood pulping processes around 1844. This was a huge breakthrough. Finally, there was a plentiful source of fiber for paper making, so they had enough pulp, a viable paper making machine to manufacture paper, and an effective printing press. Multi-section bindings, tablets, and Kindles. After Coptic books, many versions of multi-section bindings developed, including long stitch bindings. Both of these are long stitch bindings. This is another variation. So there are many, many ways of multi-section binding. Yeah, many versions of multi-section bindings developed during the long stitch binding, Riddell binding, and case bindings. The materials and book structures has continued to evolve with the invention of electronic tablets, iPads, and books on Kindles, and I'm sure there'll be more changes to come. In conclusion, to recap on materials, we've gone from stone to wax to papyrus to parchment to paper to electronic media. On structure, we've gone from sheets to scrolls to concertinas to stab bindings to Coptic and other multi-section codec books. As you can see, the materials that we wrote on directly inspired and defined the structure for books, the tools we used to write on them, the alphabets, how images were created, and even what we wrote. The invention of movable type and the printing press sparked the standardization of alphabets, the standardization of letter forms, spelling, and book structures. And I believe our next speaker will tell us more about that. And that, for now, is a story of the curious evolution book structures.
On and flows nicely. Well done, producer of the event. We're looking at typography from Gutenberg to Google. We have with us Andy McCourt, and you may remember Andy from his presentation at our first Rare Book Week event. Andy's had a long and varied career in print and graphic arts, starting with packaging design at Cadbury's in the UK, progressing to equipment and consumable supplies in Australia, writing and editing trade magazines, and helping to organise trade shows such as the Mammoth Pack and Print. And behind all of this, he has a love of collecting books and printing history. So would you please put your hands together and welcome Andy McCourt. Andy, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, and thanks again to Bob and everybody at the museum for inviting me again to speak to you. Last year it was Shakespeare, and I'd just like to begin with a little extract from what is one of Australia's biggest selling books ever, called The Sentimental Bloke. And there it is, published in 1915. This is actually a 1916 edition of The Sentimental Bloke. Angus and Robertson were the publisher, and they printed 2,500 copies to begin with because they didn't think it'd sell very well. During the war, all the diggers in the trenches in Europe wanted reminders of home, so they started getting these Sentimental Bloke books over there. Now, what it's about is a sentimental bloke and his girlfriend, Doreen, very much in love with it, but it's all written in the Australian vernacular, which is just absolutely wonderful. It was reprinted and reprinted and reprinted, and the last reprint was during the 1980s, and they reckon that over 500,000 copies of this book have been published here in Australia and overseas. So what's happened here is my page marker has disappeared from the section that I was hoping to just quote from, because it's to do with the sentimental bloke takes his girlfriend, here it is, takes his girlfriend Doreen to a Shakespeare play. So we're back to Shakespeare again. Quote, Doreen and me, we've been to see a show. The swell $2 touch, bing bong, you know. A chair apiece with velvet on a seat, a slap-up treat. The drama's writ by Shakespeare years ago about a balmy old goat called Romeo. This will go down one of the London Times, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Critique section. Lady beyond the moon, I swear, he says, and then he climbs up on the balcony, and there they smooge. They smooge a treat with pretty words, like two lovebirds. I nudge Doreen and she whispers, ain't it grand? Her eyes is shining, and I squeezes her hand. That's the way that probably Shakespeare would have written it if he'd been born in Australia. Now let's get on with it. Jean's covered some of the stuff that I'm going to cover on talking about what goes on the pages of books, newspapers, magazines, everything. The type. So who were the first typesetters? Tradition informs us that Johannes Gutenberg invented movable metal type, which as far as Europe is concerned is true. In an age when scribes were the only people able to reproduce scrolls and documents, Gutenberg's first movable typeface mimicked the scribe's writing. That's how it was designed. And it was a Gothic style, black type that you can see in the 15th century reproduction, 42-line Bible over at the back there. So he was actually trying to do what the scribes did, but with carved out type. As Jean referenced, it could be said that the first people to set type were the ancient Sumerians, possibly as long ago as 4000 BC. Mankind gradually progressed from an oral-only communication system to one where symbols and letters represented objects. As Jean explained, this was called cuneiform, from the triangular impressions that were pressed into clay, and sometimes baked thereafter to make them last longer. Even today, there exists tens of thousands of these, probably 5,000–6,000-year-old clay tablets. Most of those are in the British Museum. They're still trying to translate some. The British Museum even runs courses on how to write cuneiform. Isn't that wonderful? You can do it online. British Museum. Literacy is power. A major change occurred in China around the 9th century AD in the Song dynasty, which in the Chinese calendar is about 3,600. A courtier by the name of Bi Sheng, sometimes spelled Pi Sheng, developed movable type made from baked clay. It evolved from woodblock printing, where all the type and graphics are carved into one block. The oldest dated woodblock book, actually as a scroll, so far discovered, is the Buddhist Diamond Sutra, printed in Korea, which was a sort of satrap of China in those days. So far discovered. It resides in the British Museum also. Earlier copies were no doubt printed, but so far none have survived. Wooden movable type did coexist, but could be problematic due to distortion of the wood as it gets wetted. There are examples of large blocks of wooden type over in the exclusive typesetting and compositing area of the museum over there. But it did enable the printing of hundreds of thousands of copies that could be edited, versioned, shared and reused. Around 1200, another major milestone emerged with the development of metal movable type. Yes, around 1200, 200 years before Gutenberg. This time it was in Korea again. During the Goryeo dynasty, the oldest known book printed with metal movable type, as Jean mentioned, is called the Dik-ji. It's dated 1377, almost 200 years before Gutenberg, and it resides in the National Library of France. Let's hope they look after it and no one breaks into it. Type after Gutenberg. But what of Gutenberg's invention? He was a goldsmith and a metallurgist and came up with an alloy of lead, tin and antimony, which is still used in these sort of machines today. It triggered, it was a punch and matrix system, and it triggered durable production, reusable metal type. It triggered also an explosion in European printed communications, especially when movable type presses moved to Italy, Netherlands and France, and then to the UK with William Caxton. The Italians were particularly influential as their Roman Byzantine heritage possessed fine designs, e.g. as carved into Trajan's column. Has anyone seen Trajan's column in Rome? Gentleman there. I think, yes, this gentleman's, I think quite recently, wasn't it?
That's what I remember.
That's right. Trajan's column, Trajan was an emperor, of course. He imported stone from Egypt and erected this incredible column. And the thing for anyone interested in typography is the type is engraved by hand into it. It is immaculate, absolutely immaculate. You could call it time for new Roman capitals if you wish. So, it was all in capital. Gutenberg's scribe-influenced Gothic black letters took up a lot of space on a page, but the Romanised letters were far more efficient and legible. A French printer operating out of Venice by the name of Nicholas Jensen perfected elegant Romanised typefaces which included serifs for enhanced readability, authority and fluidity. This of course helped to expand literacy, as prior to Gutenberg, literacy was the domain of the privileged, ruling and ecclesiastical classes. It's interesting to note that when Caxton established his first English language press around 1476, so almost 20 years after Gutenberg, his first printed book was Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, so a work of fiction really, although it's probably based on fact, not the Bible. And there's a very good reason for this, because one possible reason is that to translate the Bible from Latin, Greek and Hebrew into common English was a surefire way to be accused of heresy by the church, and you'd end up getting burned at the stake as garroted or some horrible sort of death. And this happened to William Tyndale and John Rogers, Cranmer and Servetus and who knows who else. The churches wanted to keep ownership of education, literacy, and it was obviously a fight for survival for them. So Caxton used simplified versions of the Gothic black letter typeface, which went through several redesigns and became like Old English, Germanic, if anyone still buys the Sydney Morning Herald, just look at the masthead. Only one? I'll put my hand up as well, I still buy it on Saturday. But it's a Gothic style blackface typeface, and it's been that way for a long time. I think probably since the mid-1800s. Yeah, you weren't around then, Bob, sorry. I thought you were doing your apprenticeship.
Thanks, mate.
Getting back to Caxton, he used simplified versions, as I said, but why not just stick with the original Gutenberg typefaces? It's an alphabet. Why come up with different designs for the letters? And they reckon that Gutenberg's original font was 244 characters, because you can't just have capitals, you've got uppercase, lowercase, and you've got punctuation, spacing, etc. So why the need for new font designs to a point where today there are probably in the vicinity 250,000 different typefaces, and it's growing. Can you believe it? It's growing. More typefaces are being designed each day. In the pre-linotype days, foundries around the world grew and prospered in all languages, owning the designs. Then we did not just buy one font, it needed to be in various point sizes, bold and italic, and in the proverbial upper and lowercase. The reasons why typeface design became so diverse and are complex, but as literary and mass media spread in the 19th century, particularly in England, publishing houses saw the need for type choice to reflect the content, the target audience, or the unique signature of the house. You wouldn't set a serious academic work in Comic Sans, for instance. Has anyone seen that horrible typeface, Comic Sans?
Yes.
It is
really
comic, and it's without serifs.
And papyrus.
Although, in 2012, a page designer used it for the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald. It was an article quoting politicians involved in a corruption scandal. And it caused outrage amongst the type purists, and to my knowledge has never been used again since the Morning Herald. So obviously the typographer, the compositor, was taking the mickey out of the corrupt politicians in Comic Sans, which is quite brilliant. But from an aesthetic point of view, it looks awful. In our alphabet today, there are 26 letters. It was once 32. We no longer use some of the letters and character forms, which are the thorn, which is now, we use the letters TH, the ash, the wind, the eth, the yog, and the delightfully named Ethel. They were all phonetic letters in our alphabet when it was 32 letters. They reflected sounds as the English language, influenced by Nordic and Saxon, French and Latin, gradually developed into what we have today. The thorn, for example, that's the thorn with an E on the end, looked like a P or a Y sometimes, depending on how the Y was typed, with both ascenders and descenders, and it was pronounced as in the or the. Early typesetters did not have that symbol sort, did not have a thorn type available to them, so they just replaced it with a Y, thinking that's close enough, it looks very similar. And this is the origin of the English word ye for old, like ye old curiosity shop, ye old fish and chip shop, or ye English something or other. But there never was the word ye in the English language, except sign writers putting up signs on businesses, because they saw that Y and thought it was a Y, whereas it actually was meant to be the old fish and chip shop, the antique shop. So typographers changed language in a major way by being lazy. So, eventually around the mid-1800s, the thorn gave way to plain the. Although it's still used in Icelandic, so if anyone's ever been to Iceland, lovely country, you will find that they still use the thorn as the symbol, which means TH. The ampersand was also once part of the alphabet. It was dropped and used as a substitute for AMD, and or someone told me earlier today, ET, Latin is an app. Today, everyone with an Apple Mac PC and Microsoft Office can be a typesetter. It comes with hundreds of typeface choices. Some are free licenses, but many are still covered by foundries, such as Linotype, and a small amount is paid to them for using those faces still under their copyright. Others, such as Google typefaces, are free to use. Adobe typefaces were once purchased by designers on CDs. Did anyone go through that phase of having to own the file? Gee, of course. But others, I expect, I know my designer did. You had to buy them in order to use them, and they even tried to get an extra payment for the pre-press house to make the film and plates by reusing them, because they reckon they were reprocessing the typefaces. Very lucrative business for Adobe. But they're now included with Creative Cloud. We've seen type progress from fixed cardboard blocks to movable metal type, to hot metal line of type, that Bob's going to talk about, to photo typesetting, to film, laser typesetting through PostScript to PDF, with type and all images combined in one printable form, either to plates or digital output direct. However, the names of the great type designed by artists continue, such as Helvetica, Baskerville, Sabon, Garamond, Times New Roman, and $250,000. Perhaps the most elegant description of the importance of typography is the opening of Beatrice Ward's 1956 book, The Crystal Goblet. Has anyone heard of it? No, it's a pretty obscure book, very hard to get hold of. This is a précis of the introduction. Imagine that you have before you a bottle of wine. It might be deep in shimmering crimson in colour. You have two goblets before you. One is of solid gold, wrought in the most exquisite patterns, and the other is a crystal clear glass, as thin as a bubble, and just as transparent. If you have no feelings about the wine one way or another, you will want the sensation of drinking the stuff out of a vessel that may have cost thousands of pounds. But if you're a connoisseur of fine vintages, you will choose the crystal, because everything about it is calculated to reveal rather than hide the beautiful thing which it was meant to contain. So that analogy, paralleling wine with good typefaces, is what it's all about. And she says somewhere in this book that type design should actually be invisible, that the reader just experiences it without actually consciously thinking, well, this was set in Penrith or Sabon. It's curious to note that with all the frantic digitalisation of information, the loss of many great printed newspapers, the ascendancy of smartphones, declining readership of books, although that is debatable, social media, audiobooks, Kindles and so on, it's curious that myriads of typefaces have survived and new ones are being created, such as by artist Wayne Thompson of the Australian Type Foundry in Newcastle. Wayne helped develop custom sans serif fonts for the ABC in 2016. And when this goes up on the website, there's a web link there. Custom fonts in the ABC, so you'll be able to follow it there. Custom fonts were also developed for the Australian schools by a former teacher, and there is even an Aboriginal one, which can be seen at another link, which will be on the museum's website after this is put on. When the new Canberra Parliament House opened in 1988, it featured custom designed typeface for the signage, and it was called Parliament, designed by Emery Vincent Partners. To conclude on that Australian note, the original Australian Type Foundry, which closed in 1960, was set up by the ink manufacturer and press supplier F.T. Wimble, who established the foundry based on type moulds licensed from the American Type Foundation, but cast here. So they sent the moulds over here and the metal melted and cast here. To appeal to local tastes, some of these were given Australian names and New Zealand names, such as Sydney Old Style, Fogra, Mittagong, Ballarat Bold. But they were really the American ones renamed for marketing purposes. And I've done a few printouts here of one that I love, Sydney Old Style initials. 1911, cast in Sydney at the Wimbledon Australian Type Foundry, and I just think they are magnificent. Again, they did originate over in the States, the designs, but they were adapted, and I think the two-colour idea was Wimbledon's idea. Now, if you'd like to just help yourself to one of those and pass them along, and if anyone misses out, I'll print some more, just get a message through to the museum somehow. The Sydney Old Style is just a lovely example of Australian cast type, which was used, in fact there's a sample of it I think over there, and also in this old copy of Wimbledon's House magazine. You can probably see a T and an A there as drop capitals, sort of, it's just real art and meaning. Okay, just to conclude on what typefaces are, why they're important, why they make a difference. Typefaces are not just letters and words, they're sounds, feelings, accents, voices, emotions, nuances, characters and personalities. Now it gives me great pleasure to hand over to Bob Lockley, who will talk about the most significant change in typography since Gutenberg.
President for the industry, great to have you here. And Andy's, I should point out, his grandfather was a compositor on the London Times, so that's a story for another day. Just before I bring on Bob to talk about, and lead into our interactive section, hopefully you guys are all now considering becoming members of the museum. Your involvement level is up to you. You can be a member and we appreciate that support. But we do have a meeting every second month on a Saturday. It gives you more in-depth insights about what's happening here at the museum. Great networking opportunity. If you want to get more involved, you can come along on Sundays when we're open to the public. You can ask questions, you can answer questions if you like, and learn from our more experienced members, or just help out. There's always lots to be done. So if you're keen to find out more, ask any of the people in blue and they will help you out. And also if you want to sign up, we've got some forms right there. So let's talk about the eighth wonder of the world. The more you learn about printing and presses, you'll see long periods of small incremental changes. And then every now and then there's a major change. There's a real flip around. And this is what these machines do, linotype and intertypes. They totally revolutionise newspaper and book production. Bob is a former CEO of Print and Distribution with Rural Press, and then Group Director for Fairfax Print and Distribution in Australia and New Zealand, with around 20 newspaper print operations before he retired in 2017. He's the current President of the Association of the...
Years of hand setting, 400 years of work letter by letter, word by word. Very slow, very, very slow. And after printing, we've got to put all those little letters back in the typeface. Very, very, very slow. 400 years with no change in technology. How often do we get a change in technology today? Every 3.5 seconds. So we're going to show you what happens when we go from this to that. We're going to start up with a hunk of lead and we're going to produce a line of type. So how did it all happen? As Andy said, these machines behind me, the linotype was credited by Thomas Edison as being the eighth wonder of the world on numerous occasions. So, briefly to take you through that story, in the late 18th century, in the bustling streets of Baltimore, lived a quiet and determined watchmaker named Otmar Mergenthaler. Though the streets numbered with the sounds of horse-drawn carriages and chatter, Mergenthaler's mind was always occupied with something far more profound than the immediate noise around him. He had come to America from Wittenberg, Germany, with little more than his craft and an unrelenting curiosity for how things work. His hands, delicate from years of fine watchmaking, often itched for a challenge. The world of machinery fascinated him, but it wasn't till an editor named James Fane knocked on his door one chilly afternoon that Mergenthaler's life would change and take a sharp turn. James was an inventor in his own right, forever frustrated with the slow process of typesetting by hand. The printing world, though vibrant, was bogged down by this tedious task. Newspapers, books and pamphlets were all set letter by letter, and the painstaking process that consumed endless hours. James had heard that Mergenthaler was more than just a watchmaker. He was a man who could solve any mechanical problem, like no other. So James laid out his challenge. He said, Otmar, what if you could build a machine that set entire lines of type at once? Think how fast we could print. Think of the revolution it could bring. Mergenthaler's eyes gleamed with the spark of a new challenge. He spent countless nights in his workshop surrounded by gears, springs, levers. His fingers worked tirelessly sketching out designs and drafting prototypes. Weeks turned into months and the world outside seemed to vanish as Mergenthaler focused on all his energy on his invention. Failure met him at every corner. Early models jammed, others broke apart after a few uses, and some simply refused to work. But Mergenthaler was not a man to be discouraged. The beauty of invention, he would tell himself in the solitude of his workshop, is in its perseverance. One evening, after many long years of trial and error, something magical happened. His latest prototype, a hulking machine of brass and iron, hummed into life. It was large and unwieldy, but it worked. Mergenthaler watched with amazement as the machine he dubbed the linotype formed whole lines of letters at once, casting them in metal with incredible precision. Each line was perfect, sharp, and ready to print. News of the invention spread quickly. Printers across the world were astonished. For centuries they laboured over individual pieces of type, and now a single machine could do in minutes what it used to take hours to do. Nothing short of a revolution. In 1886, the New York Tribune, at the New York Tribune, the linotype was first put into commercial use. The paper's editor, Nicholas Reed, stood there in awe as he watched the machine in action. Otmar, he explained, you've done it, changed everything. And indeed he had. The linotype quickly became the standard for newspapers and publishing houses around the world. Its impact was immediate, transforming the industry and enabling mass production of books and newspapers and other printed material on an unprecedented scale. Otmar Mergenthaler, though a humble man, had become an inventor who would leave a lasting mark on history. The linotype machine not only made information more accessible, but also shaped the future of communication in the modern world. Though Mergenthaler died relatively young, at 47, his legacy lived on every printed page for decades to come. His invention born of determination and the quest to solve a seemingly impossible problem would forever remain one of the great marvels of the industrial age. And so, the quiet watchmaker from Wittenberg became not known for his watches, but for giving the world the gift of the linotype, a machine that turned the wheels of progress and changed the publishing face forever. So you can see what a genius this bloke was to do that after 400 years of no change. So, where's my man? My man, Mike. We're going to put up the latest technology and slideshows now for you. So, the linotype, it's got it's cast a line from a matrix which is this big. That's hard to see. So we'll show you what it is. This is what Mergenthaler invented, the brass matrix. You can see straight away that he had a Roman and an italic on the one brass piece. He had the keys up here, through here, and he said he was a watchmaker before. So that meant he was able to put all these maps straight back in the line. So you didn't wait till after you'd set the line before you redistributed all the type. You didn't have to wait till after the job was finished before you put all the type back in the case. You could put the type back in the case after each line was printed. So there's an absolute genius. Slide 2 gives you an example of what we have to do to set the line. So we set the matrices, and John and Steve are going to demonstrate these machines very shortly for you. And all the slugs, the secret of this machine is that all the lines go back into the boxes straight away, and all these slugs, after the job's printed, are melted and recycled. So recycling, 1860 style in the industry, was on from day one. We have 4 machines here we're going to show you in a minute. We've got a 1906 model behind us, that's a linotype. We've got a 1992 model Penrith, which is from the Nepean time, started the Nepean times and finished in 1962. We've got an C4 machine behind me and an linotype here, which we're going to be running shortly. The Sydney Morning Herald had 136 of these machines, running 24/7 until the late 80s. The Dorrigo Gazette had 2, and they ran until July 2023. So they were running these machines. That's the last letterpress newspaper in Australia, the Dorrigo Gazette. And we're going to run the machine that the Dorrigo Gazette was printed on shortly for you. Shane Jacobson, up there in Ladies in Black. I don't know if you've seen Ladies in Black. He operated this machine, along with John and a couple of other people here from the museum. So if you watch Ladies in Black again, you'll see Shane Jacobson operating the machine, all filmed here. And you thought it was at the Sydney Morning Herald in 1958. When in 1982, a long time after Mervyn Taylor died, he was inducted posthumously into the Inventors Hall of Fame. So a really clever man. We have 2 linotypes, and we talk about linotypes the whole time, but 2 linotypes here and 2 intertypes. Because shortly after anybody makes an invention, there's a copy, isn't there? So in 1914, somebody came out with the intertype, because he couldn't call it a linotype, and paint was all over it. So the difference in the 2 is that Mergenthaler invented that in the 1860s, and it's cast iron and brass, whereas the intertype in 1914 was steel and aluminium. So there's great big difference in the 2 machines, and although they look quite similar, the intertype performed better, according to the 2 gentlemen who run them both. Are you a fan of the linotype or the intertype?
Intertype.
I know Steve's a fan of the intertype because he won't even sit at the linotype. So what we want to do now is take you through and show you now how it all works. So you can get up, gather round and watch these machines work. We'll start with these 2 here first, and you can watch them intimately. As we said before, be careful, they are dangerous, because we're going from an ingot here to finished lead lines here in about 30 seconds, and the temperature of the pots is 550 degrees. So it happens rather quickly. They'll come out of there, that molten pot, and 10 seconds later they're formed and hard, but they're still hot, hence the term hot metal in the printing industry. Alright, so I'd like now to... That's the 1922 model, the 1944 model. John is one of the fastest typesetters in Australia. He can handle those 90 keys at 198,000 words a minute.
Because the letter's actually engraved on the outside as well, I can read it. Right?
You can correct it, move it around.
That's right. Before I send it away to be cast, I can actually correct it. So if I see a mistake, I take it out, put the right letter in, that goes in there, like that, and away you go. So that enhances it a little bit more. Even though we used to have proofreaders that read all this stuff, we could basically read it before it went to the proofreader. So it eliminated a lot of extra work by us just doing that before we could.
So that's right reading.
You can either just do that and that lifts it up. Or if you just want a couple of letters in italic, you just pull that in, and there it's sitting up. A pot of molten lead is there. Okay? There's a plunger. Now, what I'm using, it spins around to there. Then the pot comes forward and squirts molten lead through that mould into those letters. From there, it goes down and comes out here. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Printing press. It's an automatic platen. You might have seen a platen over there that was hand-fed with a pedal. The Germans in about 1914 came up with a fully automatic machine. Now, this is adjustable. It can print up to 5,500 an hour. There we go, pass them out, take one with you. You've got to paper bag, put them in there because they're still wet.
This machine was built in about the 1880s from the River Wharf, called a wharf tail. It was invented by a guy called Payne, and Payne was apparently a bit of an inventor at his time, and he would work out what to do, and he'd draw little drawings on the back of his bed head to try and improve the machine's running capability, and it sounded like a lot of rubbish.